Claret's stay in Madrid for 11 years in 1857 to 1868 meant that his presence also extended to the outskirts of the capital, particularly to the places related to the royal household, to which he is so closely linked due to his role as confessor to Queen Isabella II. The three walks are each designed around the royal sites, La Granja, El Escorial, and Aranjuez, and the three cities around Madrid, Segovia, Avila, and Toledo. The first itinerary will focus on the northwest of Madrid. This is undoubtedly the area with the highest density of Claret's presence. Choosing the best route, we head for one of the privileged Claretian places, La Granja de San Ildefonso. The itinerary is as follows. Departing from Madrid, we travel to La Granja, and from La Granja, we travel to Segovia and return to Madrid, stopping in El Espinar and Villalba. The itinerary in La Granja will be as follows. First, we will visit the Royal Palace. Next, we will visit the Collegiate Church, and then we will walk through the village and then to the Church of the Rosary. La Granja was a royal site 11 kilometers from Segovia, next to a small town about 1,100 inhabitants at that time.
The Haranimite monks built a farm and a guest house in this village for their retreat and contemplation. King Philip V bought the farm from them and built his palace on it. The glass factory stands out in this town. It was built in 1746 according to plans by Juan de Villanueva.
Claret accompanied the Queen to La Granja for the first time in the summer of 1858. It was in July 1859 that Father Claret properly began his activity in this town. From here he traveled from time to time to Segovia. Here, he also received the title of Archbishop of Trajanopolis in the summer of 1860, and from here he left to give a mission to Avila in mid-August of that year. We read in the biographical notes of Father Lorenzo Puig referring to the summer of 1868 in La Granja.
Every afternoon, he visited the Blessed Sacrament in the parish church and went for a short walk, always looking for the most secluded places. He visited the civil and military hospitals and the sick of the town several times. He visited the schools of both sexes, distributing books and rosaries. He attended the conferences of St. Vincent de Paul, both for men and women, preaching in all of them.
First of all, we visit the palace. Philip V commissioned Theodore Ardemans to carry out the work, and he began construction in 1721.
However, Philip Guevara designed the grand facade of the gardens, which was executed by his pupil Juan Bautista Sacchetti, the same person who carried out the work on the royal palace in Madrid. It has the typical richness of 18th century palaces, and its museum houses an impressive collection of 16th century Brussels tapestries. This royal site is famous for its gardens and monumental fountains.
From this place, Claret sent in a letter to Father Chiffre, On August 20, 1861, a small piece of paper with the definition of the missionary. However, the year 1865 would be a year of sad events, indelible in the memory of Father Claret. The Queen was under extreme pressure regarding the recognition of the Kingdom of Italy. On the one hand, the Pope was asking her not to sign. On the other, O'Donnell and the ministers were pressing her to do so. On July 11, Father Claret asked the nuncio for advice. On St. Bonaventure's Day, July 14, O'Donnell and his ministers came to the palace at 9 o'clock in the evening. The result of this meeting was the recognition of the Kingdom of Italy by the Queen and the temporary abandonment of Father Claret's work as confessor. On July 6, he received Father Clemente Serrat and Father Casanovas and two students. He invited them for a walk in the gardens and a chocolate snack. That summer, he finally resigned from the presidency of Escorial, which the Queen accepted. Claret's last stay at the La Granja began on July 3 and ended on August 8, 1868. His departure from La Granja was on Saturday, August 8. Claret left the palace with the king and queen on the way to the Escorial, where he would take the train to San Sebastian. The September Revolution would prevent him from setting foot again in the unforgettable landscape of La Granja, places where he was inspired in 1864 to write the little book Summer Afternoons in the Royal Side of San Ildefonso called La Granja. And now let us go to the Collegiate Church. The Collegiate Church is built into the palace itself.
The design is attributed to ornaments during Philip V's reign, but the decoration seems to belong to Sabatini by order of Charles III. The high altar is magnificent. Bayeux and Maella painted the dome and the vaults and the side altars. The mausoleum of Philip V and Isabella of Farnese is also remarkable.
According to the testimony of an altar boy, still alive when the centenary of the Eucharistic experience of La Granja was celebrated, Father Claret used to say Mass in the Collegiate Church, where he helped him. We will now take a short walk to the heart of the village to find the Church of the Holy Rosary. Also known as the Church of Cristo del Perdón. This parish church was completed in 1792 and belonged to the Confraternity of the Rosary. The architect was Sempronio Subisati, Procaccini's collaborator in the works on the royal palace. The atrium that opens in front of the church was the cemetery of the La Granja until it was moved outside the town in 1784. On the facade, we can already contemplate a Claretian memorial on a white marble tombstone. Built in the middle of the 18th century, it was the foundation of Doña Isabel de Farnesio.
Built in the mid-18th century, it was the foundation of Doña Isabel de Farnesio.
The interior of the temple is in neoclassical style. It has a rectangular floor plan. It has a single nave and three chapels on each side. It conserves a good Baroque organ and notable sculptures by Luis Salvador Carmona, including the sculpture of the Cristo del Perdón.
It preserves a fine Baroque organ and notable sculptures by Luis Salvador Carmona, including the sculpture of Cristo del Perdón.
The first apostolic activity in this town was a mission and exercises for the people and the members of the royal accompaniment in this church. They concluded on August 2, 1859. On the 3rd, he began the retreat for the 23 priests. On the 14th, he heard confessions and gave communion to the kings. On August 26, 1861, he himself recounts,
While I was at prayer in the Church of the Rosary at 7 o'clock in the evening, the Lord gave me the grace to keep the sacramental species and to always have the Blessed Sacrament on my bosom, day and night, sacrament on my breast.
At 7 o'clock in the morning of July 17, 1865, while praying before the image of the Holy Christ of Forgiveness, after the Queen recognized the Kingdom of Italy, Claret felt that Jesus was saying to him, Antonio, withdraw. On July 19, he left the La Granja on his way to Madrid. The excuse was the rector's serious illness. In this church, we can see a tombstone in the chapel of Christ of Forgiveness and a stained glass window in the gable commemorating the above-mentioned events. Once we have finished our visit to La Granja, we can head for the capital of this province, Segovia. 39 plus. The itinerary in Segovia will be as follows. We start at the convent of San Gabriel, the current community of the Claretian missionaries. We move on to the convent of the Encarnacion, then to the convent of Santa Isabel and the church of El Salvador. Going down and crossing the Azoguejo, we arrive at the convent of the Concepcionists. We walk towards the church of the seminary and go up to the convent of Corpus Christi. From there to the cathedral. A short walk takes us to Santo Domingo el Real and then to the Episcopal Palace, the Church of San Esteban, and the Descalzed Carmelites. It is now time to move outside the city of the Abbey of San Vicente and then to the Carmelite convent of San Juan de la Cruz. And finally, we come to visit the sanctuary of La Fuencisla, where our long walk comes to an end. Of Roman origin, to which its marvelous aqueduct bears witness, the city's splendor dates back to the end of the Middle Ages, with its Romanesque churches and noble Gothic architecture.
It was the court of the kings of the House of Trastamara, where Alfonso X, the Wise, had fitted out the Alcazar as a royal residence. In the church of San Miguel de Segovia, Isabella the Catholic was proclaimed Queen of Castile on 13 December 1474.
In 1859, in the year that marks the beginning of Father Claret's missionary presence and activity in Segovia, a city that at that time had only 10,000 inhabitants. Creo que ese es número 36. No sé si lo ha dicho el primero. The circumstance of having to accompany the Queen to La Granja during the summers made possible his frequent presence in the city and the early foundation of his missionaries here. 1868 was the Queen's last year in Spain and her last visit to Segovia. It was from 4 to 7 August, and this time she was with the King and Queen on their traditional tour of the holy places. The cave of Santo Domingo, the tomb of San Juan de la Cruz, and the shrine of Virgen de la Fuencisla. We recall here that Segovia has in a prominent place a public monument to the person of Father Claret. It is a statue by the sculptor José Garcia Moro, surrounded by a garden in front of the present-day Claret School and in the street that bears his name. Let's start with the convent of Saint Gabriel. 39A. Franciscan convent that no longer exists. Its church had a Baroque altarpiece. There is an image of the infant Jesus signed by Salsilio. On the site of the former convent stands today the residence of the Claretian missionaries, dedicated mainly to teaching and parish work. In 1861, when the congregation only had houses in Vic and Barcelona, Father Claret wrote to Father Jose Chifre to ask him to ask the foundation of Segovia. And indeed it was so. The first house was at 21 Canilla Nueva Street. It was near the Church of San Andres, where they carried out their ministry. The following year, the community moved to the convent of San Gabriel, belonging to the Alcantarine Franciscans. On July 28, 1862, Father Claret visited his missionaries in Segovia for the first time. They were already in the old convent of San Gabriel. Clemente Serrat tells the story.
At 6 a.m., he appeared on foot to say Mass in our church, and at this hour you can already count on who received him. He had to ask to find the door, and being at home, he had many occasions to preach poverty, as he is in the Franciscans' house. We had no surplus to give him for saying Mass. He stayed with us until the next morning when he left for La Granja. On the day he was there, he greeted the city authorities in the morning and spent the afternoon in the community.
The next visit to the community that summer was on a very important date, August 23. He stayed for 3 days and celebrated for the first time the Feast of the Heart of Mary. On the 25th, the community made the religious consecration prescribed by the General Chapter in the hands of the founder. His last visit on September 4. This time the King and Queen accompanied him. On 23 August 1863, he also celebrated the Feast of the Heart of Mary with the missionaries. He had to leave the next day, but returned a few days later. In fact, on September 4, he returned with the Queen to visit the house and church, and Father Serrat told Father Chifre about it.
She, the Queen, entered the church, went up to the convent with her royal retinue, saw the corridors, saw it poor, yes, but clean and tidy. The affection she is known to have for Claret is imponderable. As a docile daughter takes her father by the hand, I have seen him do the same while he was showing her the paintings of the convent. She herself said it, how much she loved him, but that he was only with the royal family out of strict obedience.
In 1864, he arrived in the community of Segovia on August 25 and stayed for 5 days. He gave them retreats from the 26th to the 29th, celebrated the Feast of the Heart of Mary, conversed with the missionaries, and gave retreats in various convents and hospitals. From these days, we have preserved a series of rules that he dedicated to the community in order to be true sons of the Heart of Mary. In 1867, Father Claret spent the Feast of the Heart of Mary with his missionaries, stopping this time more than ever in the community to conduct the exercises, which began on August 26, and which Father Crosats commented on in his notes. At the entrance to the present church, inaugurated in 1972, on the left is the grille of the tribune that Claret used for his personal prayer, and opposite is the tombstone of Father Clemente Serrat, Superior General of the congregation and founder of this house. Entering the church, which is intended to recall the half-light atmosphere of a Romanesque church, we can distinguish on the right the ambo and old pulpit from which Claret used to preach during his stays in this community. And now, we move on to the convent of La Encarnacion. The monastery of the humble Incarnation of Segovia is also known as the convent of Santa Rita.
This is the convent of the Discalced Augustinian nuns, which dates from the 16th century and is known as the convent of Santa Rita.
Claret often gave talks there and heard the confessions of some of the nuns. He used to sit in an armchair that is still preserved today and is called the armchair of the Holy Father Claret. Among others, this anecdote is told. On one of the days of his visit, the lamp of the Blessed Sacrament was out, and he humbly started to light it. But with such bad luck that the glass was twisted and all the oil fell on his cassock. Let's now go to the convent of Santa Isabel. It dates from the 15th century, Gothic in style. It is a church with interesting artistic elements.
Of particular note is the large grille in the chapel, which is similar to the Church of Fray Francisco de Salamanca, cloistered Franciscan nuns.
The mothers of San Juan de Dios commented that Father Claret would visit their convent, and they would darn his cloak. He often gave talks to the community and heard the confessions of some of the nuns. A few steps from where the convent of San Gabriel used to stand is the Plaza del Salvador, where the Church of the Savior is located. Church with Romanesque remains in the lower part of the tower and the gallery.
Church with Romanesque remains in the lower part of the tower and in the gallery. Its tower and the Gothic interior transept are striking. Of particular note is the sculpture of an Immaculate Conception by Gregorio Fernandez, and a valuable Hispano-Flemish triptych with the Adoration of the Magi, which is kept in the sacristy.
It is recorded in the archives of this parish that on September 8, 1859, on the occasion of the Nativity of Mary,
Anthony Mary Claret, Archbishop of Cuba, and Confessor to Her Majesty Queen Isabella II, after the High Mass, the Archbishop maintained the reservation of the Blessed Sacrament, and that Father Claret ended these services by singing a solemn salve to Our Lady of the Angels.
let us now visit the Conceptionists. It is recorded in the newspaper La Esperanza that in 1859 and whenever he had the opportunity,
He preached in each of the convents of nuns in the conferences of St. Vincent de Paul to the daughters of the Immaculate Conception.
we find the diocesan seminary nearby.
The temple project was carried out by Italian architect Giuseppe Valeriano in 1555.
The generously proportioned facade provides access to a church with 3 naves of a certain architectural value, adorned with Baroque altarpieces.
On August 26, Claret began the missions for the people in the church of the seminary at 7:30 in the evening, so that all kinds of people could attend comfortably. However, due to the affluence of the public after the first day, the mission had to be moved to the cathedral. And now let us visit the convent of Corpus Christi. It occupies what was once a Jewish synagogue from the 13th century.
It was converted into a Christian church in 1410 and preserved until the fire of 1899. The interior has been reconstructed along the general lines of the old building. In 2003, its decoration was redone, and with it, its original image was recovered. Today, it is a convent of Poor Clare nuns.
The Sisters Clarissa's note.
According to our predecessors, Father Claret sometimes came to give them talks. A nun told us that when she was a child and was admitted to the provincial residence because she had lost both father and mother, she met Father Claret, and as his fame as a saint was already widespread, she said, "How happy I would be if Father Claret greeted me." And what was her surprise that along the many little girls who were there, he went to greet her in particular. This nun, who is now deceased, was called Sister Concepcion.
Now we go to the Plaza Mayor, the privileged place where the Lady of the Cathedrals is located. We enter the Plaza Mayor Square and leaving the Juan Bravo Theater and the town hall to our right, we head towards Segovia Cathedral. Emperor Charles V ordered the construction of the new cathedral in 1525 in a different place from the old one, destroyed in the War of the Communities.
It is late Gothic in style and the work of Gil de Hontanen. The choir loft is neoclassical in style and was designed by Ventura Rodriguez in 1784. Inside, among other works of art, there is a bas-relief of the Lamentation for the Dead Christ by Juan de Juni.
A recumbent Christ by Gregorio Hernandez, a carving characterized by the dramatic features emphasized by the blood flowing from his wounds, and 2 large organs built in 1473 in the time of King Henry IV for the old cathedral and relocated to the new one in 1559. Claret's mission to the people in 1859 began in the seminary chapel but had to be moved to the cathedral due to the large crowds. It ended on September 8. More than 1,000 people of all ages received communion at the Mass. The chronicler comments in the newspaper La Esperanza.
Every day, the attendance of all kinds of people from the city and the villages is greater, and everywhere the confessionals are surrounded by penitents seeking absolution for their sins.
In 1860, Father Claret returned to the city from the La Granja, preaching in the cathedral as well as in other convents. Leaving the cathedral and crossing the Plaza Mayor, we head for the convent of Santo Domingo el Real. It dates from the 13th to the 17th century and has occupied the house of the Portocarrera family since 1513. Part of it is the Tower of Hercules.
The house palace of the Arias de la Hoz family has been a convent of the Dominican mothers since 1513. The convent church, built in the 17th century, has a facade facing the Plaza de la Trinidad. It is a temple built in the 1600s with a single nave and a fine plateresque altarpiece.
The Dominican sisters write in their chronicles of 1859.
This year, we had the pleasure of hearing the Venerable Father Anthony Mary Claret preach for the first time. He gave missions in the cathedral, and before that, he gave exercises to the clergy in the parish of San Esteban. In the meantime, he preached a talk in all the communities, and from this year until 1868, he came every year because he came to La Granja with Queen Isabel. The first year, he allowed us to kiss his ring. From the communion rail, he greeted the community with such kindness. It was a real joy because it seemed we were talking to a saint. The last year, he said goodbye until we meet in heaven.
In a chronicle by Maria Jacova Zereso, we read how these Dominican nuns currently keep in use in their refectory the pulpit of their church used by Claret. Now we go to the Episcopal Palace in Plaza de San Esteban. The Episcopal Palace of Segovia is located in the Plaza de San Esteban. It was built in the time of Felipe II. It originally belonged to the nobleman, and from 1755 it became the Episcopal Palace.
On the pediment, we can see the bishop's coat of arms, which had replaced that of the lords. The entire front is made of granite ashlars with windows crowned with a pediment, bust in the tympanums, and figurines at the top.
On his first visit to Segovia in 1859, Claret resided in this palace. On September 9, he took leave of the clergy with a conference on morals to the ecclesiastics. On September 4, he had written here,
While I was in meditation at 4:25 in the morning, Jesus Christ told me, "You have to teach mortification to the missionaries, Antonio." A few minutes later, the Blessed Virgin told me, "This is how you will bear fruit, Antonio."
In the apostolic process, we read this testimony of Father Candido Reta, a priest.
Claret was eating in the Episcopal Palace of Segovia with the prelate of the diocese, Fray Rodrigo Echevarria y Briones, and Cardinal Alameda y Brea, Bishop of Toledo. And when Father Claret left the table, as was his custom, since he never stayed long at the table, the Bishop of Segovia, speaking to the Cardinal, said, "This Claret is a saint." And then the cardinal replied, "You say very little, Bishop. He is a saint, but a Catalan saint."
Without leaving the square, we go to the church of San Esteban. It is a Romanesque church dating from the 13th century.
It has 3 naves, and inside there is a depiction of Calvary dating from the end of the 13th century. Its slender Romanesque tower from the early 13th century stands out.
On August 16, 1859, Father Claret went to Segovia for the first time to give a 10-day retreat to the clergy in the Church of San Esteban. These exercises caused a great impression, as the newspaper La Esperanza reported on September 2.
The church was crowded and almost full of priests from the city and the neighboring villages, more and more every day, with hardly a breath to be heard. And we felt that the 2 hours were coming to an end, and the time we spent there became a moment.
It is now time to visit the Descalzed Carmelites. (16th to 17th century convent founded by Saint Teresa of Jesus on March 19, 1574, in the presence of Saint John of the Cross.
It contains a Baroque chapel in which an image of Saint Joseph by the sculptor Salvador Carmona stands out. The present building was constructed in the 17th century.
Claret accompanied the Queen on her visit to this convent, where she liked to pray in the saint's room. He blessed the wooden crosses in the various cells and gave them a talk, during which he warned them of the immediate revolution. A long path takes us to the Cistercian Abbey. It is an abbey of Cistercian nuns from the 12th to 17th centuries.
It is the oldest in the city, as a church dedicated to Saint Vincent was built in 919. Some of the abbess's tomes are preserved inside, one of them, an alabaster, being of interest.
The Bernardine mothers commented that the older ones told them that they had heard that whenever Father Claret went to La Granja in summer, he visited the convent and gave them some fervent talks in the same parlor that is still preserved today. At the foot of the Alcazar, past the San Marcos quarter, we reach the Alameda de la Fuencisla, where the Carmelite convent is located. It was founded by San Juan de la Cruz in 1586, and its remains rest in a coffer in a luxurious mausoleum carved in marble and bronze by Granja.
Among the Carmelite treasures is the painting of Jesus, who according to tradition spoke to the saint. Also, evocative are the 2 little chapels where the saint often retired to pray. The remains of the 13th century Trinitarian convent of Rocamadour can be found here.
In a letter of September 1861 to Father Jose Cifre, Claret encouraged him to found a convent in Segovia.
These two, the bishop and the secretary, have said they would be better off in the convent of St. John of the Cross, which is in the neighborhoods of this city, whose convent is at the disposal of the bishop, who asks the government for exercises for ordained priests. I went to see the convent yesterday, and it was in good condition. The cells are small, but better for winter.
The house records of the community undoubtedly alluded to this visit when it says,
At the beginning of October 1859, the date is wrong, the Archbishop of Cuba, Anthony Mary Claret, Confessor to Her Majesty the Queen, accompanied by two fathers of his new Institute of Missionaries of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, came to this sanctuary. The Archbishop said Mass at the altar of our Holy Founder. After drinking chocolate, they have a careful look at the church, the chapel of the saint, the whole convent, and all its offices.
And finally, we approach the sanctuary of La Fuencisla. Located in the Alameda de la Fuencisla, this sanctuary is dedicated to the Virgin de la Fuencisla, patron saint of the city. Its name is typical in Segovia and means a spring that flows. The current sanctuary is due to the miracle of Maria del Salto, which occurred in this place where miraculously a Jewish woman unjustly accused of adultery at the moment of being pushed to the void from the top of the rock entrusted herself to the Virgin Mary and did not suffer any harm. The image of the Virgin de la Fuencisla was carved in the 13th century during the reign of Alfonso VI.
The church is Baroque, dating from the 16th and 17th centuries, the work of Pedro Brizuela. The 18th century ironwork is particularly noteworthy. The image of the Virgin of Fuencisla was carved in the 13th century, during the reign of Alfonso VI. It is located in the altarpiece of the church, the work of Pedro de Torres.
We know that Claret accompanied the kings every year on their visits to sacred places, including this sanctuary. Before finishing this walk, we should point out two more places where Claret's traces can be found on this route. El Espinar, where he stopped on his way to Avila, given his desire to visit and preach in the church of San Eutropio, whose exterior magnificence had impressed him, with its beautiful main altarpiece, the work of Francisco Giralte, and the paintings of Sanchez Coelho. He also took the opportunity to preach at the convent of the Franciscan nuns of Santa Isabel, now in ruins. First, Villalba, where he used to stop because he frequently used the railway on his way to La Granja and Segovia. Here we conclude this first walk, which will surely take up almost the whole day, but we leave you with unforgettable memories of Claret, the city of Segovia, and La Granja.